The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal spires of Galactic Academy as students from dozens of worlds hurried to their classes. The Academy sat on Zarian Prime, a peaceful planet where violence was unknown and dangerous creatures existed only in textbooks. Here, young beings from across the galaxy came to learn about the universe in perfect safety. Professor Ziegthen stood at the front of his advanced xenobiology classroom, his crystalline skin catching the light as he moved. His species, the Altarians, were known for their careful study of life forms. They never took risks. They observed from a distance and wrote detailed reports. This had kept them alive for millions of years. The classroom buzzed with quiet conversation. Veltara, a tall Shellstun with translucent blue skin, sat near the front. Her people moved like dancers, graceful and light. Next to her, Crick shifted nervously in his seat. The small reptilian saurian had scales that changed color with his emotions. Right now, they were a worried yellow-green dot in the back corner sat Jake Mitchell, the only human in the class. He was part of a new exchange program between Earth and the Galactic Federation. Most students found him strange. He walked differently than other species. Where they moved carefully, he moved with confidence. Where they spoke softly, he was direct. But he was friendly enough and his grades were good. Professor Ziegthen cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. Today I will give you your final assignment for this semester, he announced. His voice had the musical quality common to his species. Each of you will conduct a field study of an apex predator from your homeworld. A shocked silence filled the room. Veltara's skin turned a pale white. Crix's scales shifted to deep orange, the color of extreme fear among his people. Other students began whispering urgently in their native languages. "Professor," Veltara said, her voice shaking, "surely you don't mean we should go near these creatures?" "I mean exactly that," Ziegthen replied. "For too long, our studies have relied on old data and distant observations. It is time for fresh research. You must gather primary source information through direct field study." A student named Mordic, whose species looked like walking trees, raised a branch-like arm. "Sir, the void stalkers of my world have killed thousands of my people. They hunt in packs and can phase through solid matter. How can we study them and survive?" "That," said the professor, "is for each of you to determine. Use your intelligence. Use your species' natural abilities. But you must observe these creatures in their natural habitat and document their behavior." Crix's scales had turned almost black now. "The bone crushers of my homeworld can hear a heartbeat from 5 miles away. They move faster than our eyes. Can follow? My ancestors built entire cities underground to escape them." "Then perhaps you will need to be very quiet," Professor Ziegthen suggested. "I'll find another approach." The students looked at each other with growing panic. These were not ordinary animals they were being asked to study. These were the creatures that had shaped their evolution, the monsters that lived in their oldest nightmares. Every species in the galaxy had apex predators that had driven them to develop advanced technology, hide in safe places, or evolve special abilities just to survive. "What about you, Jake?" the professor asked, turning to the human. "What apex predators does Earth have?" Jake looked up from his notes. He had been writing something down while the others talked. "Oh, lots of them," he said casually. "Great white sharks, grizzly bears, polar bears, lions, tigers, crocodiles, wolves. Depends on what region you're in." The alien students stared at him. Veltara's translator made confused beeping sounds as it tried to process his tone. He had spoken about these creatures the same way someone might discuss different types of fruit. "And which one will you study?" Professor Ziegthen asked. Jake shrugged. "I'm thinking grizzly bears. There's a good population in Yellowstone National Park. Should be interesting to see them up close during salmon season." Crix's scales turned white. This was the color his people showed when they couldn't understand what they were hearing. "Up close?" he whispered. "Yeah," Jake said. "I mean, you can't really study behavior properly from a distance, right? You need to see how they move, how they react to different situations, what their body language means." Veltara found her voice. Jake, I don't think you understand. Apex predators are the creatures that kill everything else. They are at the top of the food chain because nothing can stop them. I know what apex predators are, Jake replied. We have lots of them on Earth. Some of them are pretty dangerous. Pretty dangerous? Mordecai's bark-like skin was turning gray with shock. The void stalkers of my world have wiped out entire colonies. They are not pretty dangerous. They are death itself. Jake looked around the room and seemed to notice the fear for the first time. Oh, he said. I guess every planet is different. Yeah, our predators can be dangerous too. People get killed by bears and sharks sometimes. But it's not that common if you're careful. Not that common, Crick squeaked. His voice had gone up 3 octaves. Well, you have to use common sense. Jake explained. Don't swim in murky water where sharks hunt. Don't get between a mother bear and her cubs. Don't run from a predator unless you're sure you can outrun it. Basic stuff. The alien students looked at him like he had grown a second head. Basic stuff? These were survival strategies against creatures that could kill with a single bite or swipe of a claw. How could any of this be basic? Professor Ziegfeld watched this exchange with growing interest. He had studied many species during his long career, but humans were new to the galactic community. Their planet had only recently been contacted, and they were still largely unknown. This conversation was revealing. Tell me, Jake, the professor said, how do your people typically deal with these apex predators? Deal with them? Jake thought for a moment. I guess it depends. We've learned to live with them mostly. Some we hunt for food or to protect livestock. Some we protect because they're endangered. Some we just avoid or use caution around. My grandfather used to tell stories about hunting. Bears with just a rifle and a good tracking dog. The silence in the room was deafening. Veltara Translator finally gave up trying to process the conversation and simply displayed error messages. You hunt them? She whispered. Some people do, Jake said. It's regulated now, of course. Most people prefer to just watch them or photograph them. There's this whole tourism industry around seeing predators in the wild. People pay good money for it. Crix fainted. His small body hit the floor with a soft thud, scales cycling rapidly through colors as his mind tried to process what he had heard. Tourism. Humans paid money to see. Apex predators for fun. Perhaps we should continue this discussion next week. Professor Ziegfeld said quickly. Class dismissed. Please begin thinking about your projects. As the students filed out, they gave Jake a wide berth. He seemed nice enough, but clearly there was something very wrong with his species. Who else would treat deadly predators like tourist attractions? Jake packed his notes, humming quietly to himself. He was already excited about the project. He had always wanted to see grizzly bears in their natural habitat. This assignment was going to be fun. Behind him, Veltara helped Crix to his feet. The small Saurian was still pale and shaking. What kind of world produces beings like that? Crix whispered. Veltara looked back at Jake, who was chatting cheerfully with Professor Ziegfeld about research permits and camping equipment. I don't know, she replied. But I think we're about to find out. The days following Professor Ziegfeld's assignment announcement were filled with panic throughout the xenobiology class. Students from across the galaxy worked frantically to develop ways to study their homeworld's apex predators without dying. In the process, Veltara spent her time in the Academy's Advanced Technology Lab, working with quantum telescopes and long-range sensors. Her people had perfected the art of observation from impossible distances. She was designing a system that could watch shadow hunters from orbit, tracking their movements through dimensional phases without ever coming within 1,000 miles of the creatures. The quantum entanglement array should let me observe their hunting patterns without any risk, she explained to her lab partner, a crystalline being named Quinn. My ancestors learned long ago that the only safe distance from a shadow hunter is on another planet. Quinn nodded approvingly. His species had similar philosophies about dangerous creatures. Wise approach, direct contact with apex predators is suicide. Meanwhile, Crix was working on an even more elaborate plan. His small reptilian frame hunched over computer terminals as he designed underground observation bunkers that could be deployed on his homeworld by remote drones. The bunkers would be buried 50 feet below ground and equipped with seismic sensors to detect bone crusher movements from miles away. The vibrations of their footsteps can be felt through solid rock, he explained to anyone who would listen. My people have been tracking them this way for centuries. If I can build a network of sensors across their territory, I can map their behavior patterns without ever seeing one. Other students in the class had similar approaches. Everyone was focused on distance, technology, and safety measures that would keep them as far away from their apex predators as possible, everyone except Jake. The human spent his time in the Academy's communication center, making calls to something he called park services and wildlife researchers on Earth. He spoke to these people as if asking about apex predators was the most normal thing in the world. "Hi, this is Jake Mitchell from the Galactic Academy," he would say into the communication device. "I'm doing research on grizzly bear behavior, and I was wondering if I could get permission to set up some observation equipment in Yellowstone during salmon season." Veltara happened to be walking past when she heard one of these conversations. She stopped in shock when she heard the response from Earth. "Sure, no problem," came a cheerful voice. "We get researchers out here all the time. Just need to file the proper permits and follow safety protocols. When are you planning to visit? Safety protocols?" Veltara as translator worked overtime trying to make sense of this. What safety protocols could possibly work against apex predators? "I was thinking next month," Jake replied. "That should be peak salmon run, right? I want to observe feeding, behavior, and territorial interactions." Perfect timing," the Earth voice said. "The bears are really active then. Dr. Lisa Grant is leading a research team that month. I'll put you in touch with her. She's been working with grizzlies for 20 years. 20 years. Veltara felt faint. This Dr. Grant person had been near apex predators for 20 years and was still alive. How was that possible? After Jake finished his call, Veltara approached him carefully. Her people were naturally graceful, but now she moved with the extra caution reserved for approaching something dangerous. "Jake," she said softly, "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." "Oh, hey, Vel," Jake said with a smile. "Getting excited about this project. It's going to be amazing to see grizzlies in their natural habitat." "Jake," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to explain something to you." "I don't think you understand what apex predators really are." Jake looked confused. "Sure I do. They're the top predators in their ecosystems. Grizzly bears are omnivores, but they're definitely apex predators in North America." Veltara's skin shifted to a pale blue, the color her people showed when delivering grave news. "Jake, apex predators are not just animals that eat other animals. They are death incarnate. They are the creatures that shaped our evolution through terror." She activated her personal display device, showing him images of shadow hunters. The creatures looked like living nightmares, with multiple arms that could phase between dimensions and eyes that glowed with an inner fire. "These shadow hunters can move through solid matter," she explained. "They hunt in packs across multiple dimensions simultaneously. When they find prey, they appear from nowhere and kill instantly. My people developed quantum technology not for space travel, but to hide from these creatures." Jake studied the images with interest. "Wow, those are really something. Do they hunt cooperatively like Earth wolves?" "The interdimensional thing is fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint." Veltara stared at him. He was looking at the most feared predators of her homeworld, with the same expression he might use to study interesting insects. "Jake, you're missing the point," she said desperately. "These creatures have killed millions of my people over the centuries. We built our civilization in hidden cities that exist partially outside normal space just to escape them." "That's really smart," Jake said admiringly. "Humans have done similar things, just not as advanced. We built walls, used fire, developed weapons, different approaches to the same problem." Before Veltara could respond, Crix approached them. His scales were their worried yellow-green color, and he was carrying a thick folder of documentation. "Jake," Crix said, his voice high with stress. Vel told me you plan to approach apex predators directly. I must show you something. He opened his folder and pulled out images of bone crushers. The creatures were massive, with jaws that could snap trees in half and claws that could tear through solid rock. Their bodies were covered in armor-like plates, and their eyes held an intelligence that spoke of cunning predators. Bone crushers are not just dangerous, Crix explained. They are perfect killing machines. They can hear a heartbeat from 5 miles away. They can run faster than our fastest vehicles. Their bite can crush metal. My ancestors tried to fight them for thousands of years before giving up and going underground. Jake examined the images carefully. These guys are huge. What do they usually hunt? And how deep underground did your people have to go to avoid their hearing? Crix's scales flickered through several colors rapidly. You're asking the wrong questions, Jake. You shouldn't be wondering how to study them. You should be wondering how to hide from them. But hiding won't help me complete the assignment, Jake pointed out reasonably. I need to observe behavior. Document hunting patterns, maybe get some footage. Can't do that from underground. Footage? Crix squeaked. You want to make recordings of bone crushers? Well, yeah. Visual documentation is pretty standard for this kind of research. Veltara and Crix exchanged glances. They were beginning to realize that Jake's species might have a fundamentally different relationship with dangerous creatures than anyone else in the galaxy. Jake, Veltara said slowly, what is the most dangerous predator on your homeworld? Jake thought for a moment. That's tough to say. Probably depends on the situation. In the water, great white sharks are pretty formidable. On land, maybe polar. Bears or grizzlies, saltwater crocodiles are nasty. Big cats like lions and tigers. Actually, some of the most dangerous animals aren't even predators. Hippos and elephants kill more people than most predators do. And humans live on the same planet as all these creatures. Crix asked weakly. Sure, there's lots of room. Most of the time we just avoid each other. Sometimes there are conflicts. But that's usually when humans move into their territory or when the animals are desperate for food. Conflicts? Veltara whispered. Yeah, like if a bear gets into someone's garbage or a big cat starts hunting livestock. Usually we just relocate the animal somewhere else. Sometimes we have to put them down if they become too dangerous, but that's pretty rare. The two aliens stared at him in horrified fascination. Humans lived alongside apex predators and occasionally had to put them down when they became problematic. This was beyond their understanding. Jake, Crix said carefully, when you say put them down, you mean ... Yeah. It's not something we like to do, but sometimes it's necessary. For public safety. Veltara's legs gave out, and she sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Her people had spent millions of years developing technology to hide from shadow hunters, and humans casually discussed killing their apex predators when they became inconvenient. What kind of world did you come from? She asked quietly. Jake shrugged. Just Earth. I mean, it can be dangerous if you're not careful, but most places are pretty safe if you use common sense. Professor Ziegthen appeared in the doorway, having overheard the last part of the conversation. His crystalline features showed deep thoughtfulness. Jake, the professor said, I think it would be valuable for the class if you could share some information about your homeworld's environment. Perhaps tomorrow we could have a discussion about Earth's ecosystem. Sure, Jake said cheerfully. I brought some nature documentaries from home. Lots of great footage of predators hunting and stuff. As Jake walked away, humming to himself, Veltara and Crix sat in stunned silence. I think, Veltara said slowly, we need to do some research on Earth. Professor Ziegthen nodded grimly. Something was becoming clear to him about humanity. 2 weeks later, Jake stood at the edge of Yellowstone National Park with his camping gear and research equipment. The morning air was crisp and clean, filled with the sounds of birds and rushing water. To Jake, it felt like the perfect day to start his project back at Galactic Academy. Half the xenobiology department had gathered in Professor Ziegthen's classroom to watch Jake's live video feed. Word had spread throughout the academy about the human who planned to study apex predators. Up close, students and faculty from other departments had come to witness what many believed would be a tragic but educational demonstration of why such research was impossible. Valtara sat in the front row, her translucent skin pale with worry. Crix was beside her, his scales shifting nervously between yellow and orange. Even Professor Zeekthan looked tense as he activated the communication array. "Jake, can you hear us?" The professor's voice crackled through the device. "Loud and clear, Professor." Jake's cheerful voice came back. The video feed showed him adjusting a small camera on his backpack. "Just got to the research station. Dr. Grant is going to show me the best spots to set up observation equipment." The camera view shifted as Jake turned to face a middle-aged human woman with weathered features and confident movements. This was Dr. Lisa Grant, the researcher who had been studying grizzly bears for 20 years. "Welcome to Yellowstone, Jake," Dr. Grant said with a warm smile. "Beautiful day for bear watching. The salmon run started early this year, so we should see plenty of activity." The alien audience watched in fascination as Dr. Grant spoke about deadly apex predators the same way Jake did, with casual familiarity and no apparent fear. "Are you worried about safety?" Jake asked, setting up his recording equipment. Dr. Grant laughed. "Bears are dangerous, sure, but they're not out to get us. Most of the time they'd rather avoid humans altogether. We just need to be smart about it. Keep your distance, make noise so you don't surprise them, and never get between a mother and her cubs." Valtara's translator made confused beeping sounds again. These humans were discussing safety around apex predators as if it were a routine concern, like checking the weather before going outside. "There's a good salmon stream about 2 miles up the trail," Dr. Grant continued. "The bears like to fish there in the morning. We'll set up your observation post nearby, but far enough away that we won't interfere with their behavior." The camera bounced gently as Jake walked, showing the forest path and mountain scenery. To the watching aliens, it looked like he was walking calmly into the most dangerous environment imaginable. "This is insane," whispered Mordic, the tree-like student. "He's walking directly into apex predator territory." "With no protective equipment," added Crix weakly. "No weapons, no shields, no escape pod." "He has a backpack," Valtara pointed out, though her voice lacked conviction. After about an hour of hiking, Jake and Dr. Grant reached the salmon stream. The water was clear and fast-moving, with fish jumping upstream to spawn. It was exactly the kind of place where apex predators would hunt. "Perfect," Dr. Grant said, pointing to a cluster of large rocks about 50 yards from the stream. "We can set up over there. Good view of the fishing spots, but far enough away that the bears won't feel threatened." Jake began unpacking his equipment while Dr. Grant scanned the area with binoculars. The alien audience watched in tense silence. As the two humans went about their work with no apparent concern for the deadly creatures that could appear at any moment. "Movement upstream," Dr. Grant said calmly. "Looks like we have our first visitor." The camera zoomed in as Jake turned toward the stream. A massive brown shape emerged from the forest, moving with surprising grace for something so large. It was a grizzly bear, easily 8 feet tall and weighing over 600 pounds. In the academy classroom, several students gasped. Crix fainted again, his small body hitting the floor with a soft thud. The creature on the screen was the size of a small vehicle, with claws that could tear through metal and jaws powerful enough to crush bones. "Beautiful animal," Jake said quietly, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Look at the muscle definition in the shoulders." The bear moved to the edge of the stream and began fishing with practiced efficiency. Its massive paws moved faster than seemed possible, snatching salmon from the water with precise timing. "Note the hunting technique," Jake narrated for his project recording. "The bear is using both vision and hearing to track the fish. See how it positions itself at the bend in the stream where the salmon have to slow down?" Dr. Grant nodded approvingly. "You've got a good eye for behavior. This is an adult male, probably around 15 years old. He's been fishing this stream longer than some of our research assistants have been alive. The watching aliens could not believe what they were seeing. Jake was analyzing apex predator behavior in real time, taking notes and making observations, as if he were watching a documentary instead of witnessing a creature that could kill him in seconds. "The bear doesn't seem concerned about our presence," Jake observed. "Is that normal?" "Bears have good vision, so he definitely knows we're here," Dr. Grant explained. "But we're far enough away that he doesn't see us as a threat." Bears are actually pretty tolerant of humans if we respect their space. Tolerant. The word echoed in the minds of the alien observers. This apex predator was tolerant of the presence of other creatures in its territory. Such a concept was beyond their understanding. For the next several hours, Jake and Dr. Grant observed the bear fishing, documenting its behavior patterns and taking detailed notes. The bear caught dozens of salmon, eating some and ignoring others in a display of abundance that fascinated Jake. "Energy conservation," he noted. "The bear is being selective about which fish to consume fully. It's taking the parts with the highest fat content and leaving the rest." "Exactly," Dr. Grant agreed. "During salmon season, bears can afford to be picky. They're building up fat reserves for winter hibernation." As the day progressed, more bears appeared. A mother with 2 cubs emerged from the forest downstream, and Jake's excitement was obvious in his voice. "This is incredible," he said, adjusting his camera to get better footage. "Look at how the mother is teaching the cubs to fish." The alien audience watched in stunned silence as Jake documented family behavior among apex predators. The cubs were playful and clumsy, occasionally falling into the water as they tried to copy their mother's fishing technique. "Are the cubs dangerous too?" Jake asked. "Cubs are generally less aggressive than adults," Dr. Grant explained, "but the mother is extremely protective. That's when bears are most dangerous to humans, when they think their cubs are threatened." As if to demonstrate the point, the mother bear suddenly stood up on her hind legs. Towering over the landscape as she scanned for threats, she was looking directly at Jake and Dr. Grant. The academy classroom fell completely silent. Several students held their breath, waiting to witness the human's final moments. "Don't move," Dr. Grant said quietly. "She's just checking us out." Jake remained perfectly still, his camera continuing to record. The bear stared at them for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then, apparently satisfied that they posed no threat to her cubs, she dropped back down to all fours and returned to fishing. "Textbook behavior," Jake said, his voice steady despite having just been evaluated by an apex predator. The mother assessed the potential threat and determined we weren't worth her attention. Professor Ziegthen realized his hands were shaking. He had just watched a human remain calm while being directly examined by a creature that could have killed him without effort. As the sun began to set, Jake packed up his equipment with obvious reluctance. "This has been amazing," he told Dr. Grant. "The behavioral data I've collected today is incredible. Thank you for showing me the best observation spots." "My pleasure," Dr. Grant replied. "Come back tomorrow if you want. The morning fishing is usually even better." As Jake's video feed ended for the day, the academy classroom remained silent. Professor Ziegthen looked around at his students and colleagues, all of whom wore expressions of shock and disbelief. "Questions?" he asked finally. Valtara raised a trembling hand. "Professor, what kind of planet produces beings who can remain calm while apex predators evaluate them as potential threats?" Professor Ziegthen looked at the now dark screen where Jake's impossible day had just played out. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to learn much more about Earth." Jake's 3rd day in Yellowstone began like the others, but something was different. The bears seemed more active, and Dr. Grant appeared more alert than usual as they hiked to the observation site. "Weather's changing," she explained to Jake as they walked. "There's a storm coming in later today. The bears know it, so they'll be more active this morning, trying to get in extra fishing before the rain hits." Back at the academy, Professor Ziegthen had moved Jake's video feed to the main auditorium. Word about the humans' impossible research had spread throughout the galactic academic community. Representatives from dozens of species had arrived to witness what they could only describe as a death wish being carried out in the name of science. The auditorium was packed. In the front rows sat the xenobiology students, now joined by evolutionary biologists, behavioral psychologists, and even military strategists from various worlds. Everyone wanted to understand how any sentient being could function normally in the presence of apex predators. Today marks Jake's third day among the grizzly bears, Professor Ziegfeld announced to the crowd. His research has already provided insights that centuries of distant observation could not achieve. The screen flickered to life, showing Jake setting up his equipment near the familiar salmon stream. But today the forest seemed busier. Multiple bears were already fishing, and more were emerging from the tree line. "Wow," Jake's voice came through clearly. "This is like a bear convention. Dr. Grant, I count at least 7 adults and 3 cubs." "Biggest gathering I've seen this season," Dr. Grant replied. "The approaching storm has them all motivated to feed heavily." Veltara watched with fascination and terror as Jake calmly documented the largest concentration of apex predators she had ever seen. On her homeworld, a single shadow hunter was considered a planetary emergency. Here was a human observing 7 of Earth's apex predators simultaneously. "Note the social dynamics," Jake said, narrating for his research log. "The bears are maintaining distance from each other, but there's definitely a hierarchy at work. That large male upstream is getting the best fishing spot, and the others are respecting his position." As Jake spoke, the large male bear he had mentioned suddenly stopped fishing and looked directly at something in the forest. The bear's posture changed, becoming alert and tense. "Something's got his attention," Dr. Grant said quietly. Could be another bear moving in, but it wasn't another bear. What emerged from the forest made even Dr. Grant tense up. It was a massive grizzly, larger than any of the others, with scarred fur and one partially damaged ear. This was clearly an old, experienced bear, and its presence immediately changed the atmosphere by the stream. "That's Big Ben," Dr. Grant whispered. "He's the dominant male in this territory. 23 years old and over 800 pounds. The other bears will defer to him." Sure enough, the other bears began moving away from the prime fishing spots. But the mother with cubs, who had been fishing downstream, found herself in a difficult position. To leave with her cubs, she would have to pass close to the massive dominant male. "This could get interesting," Jake said, his voice still calm but more focused. "The mother is caught between protecting her cubs and respecting the dominant male's claim to the area." What happened next would be talked about in xenobiology classes for years to come. The mother bear, instead of fleeing or becoming aggressive, made a series of subtle postures and movements. She lowered her head slightly, moved slowly, and guided her cubs in a wide arc around Big Ben's position. "Incredible," Jake whispered. "She's using submissive body language to signal that she's not challenging his dominance, while still protecting her cubs. Look how the dominant male acknowledges her with that slight head nod." The alien audience watched in stunned silence as Jake documented a complex social interaction between multiple apex predators. These weren't mindless killing machines. They were intelligent creatures with sophisticated social structures. "Jake," Dr. Grant said quietly, "we need to move. Big Ben doesn't like humans as much as the others do." But before they could pack up their equipment, Big Ben noticed them. The massive bear stood up on his hind legs, all 800 pounds of muscle and claw towering against the sky. He was less than 40 yards away, and his attention was entirely focused on the 2 humans in the auditorium. Several alien dignitaries stood up, unable to continue watching what they assumed would be Jake's final moments. Crix had fainted again, and Veltara was gripping her chair so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. "Don't run," Dr. Grant said calmly. "Make yourself look bigger, but don't make eye contact. Back away slowly." Jake raised his arms above his head and began backing away, but he kept his camera running. Even facing imminent death, he was still documenting behavior. "Subject is evaluating threat level," he said quietly into his recorder. Note the defensive posture rather than aggressive. The bear is determining whether we represent a danger to his territory or resources. Big Ben dropped back to all fours and took several steps toward them. The distance closed to 30 yards, then 25. Jake and Dr. Grant continued their slow retreat, making no sudden movements. "He's testing us," Dr. Grant whispered. "Seeing how we respond to his dominance display." "Fascinating," Jake replied, still recording. "The behavior is similar to what I've read about Wolfpack dynamics, but adapted for a solitary species that occasionally shares resources." The bear stopped advancing and stared at them for long moments. Then, apparently satisfied that they were leaving his territory, Big Ben turned back to the stream and began fishing in the spot vacated by the other bears. "My heart rate is probably through the roof right now," Jake said with a shaky laugh as they continued backing away. But that was incredible to witness. The complexity of the social interaction was beyond anything I expected. Dr. Grant smiled grimly. "Welcome to bear research, Jake. It's not always that exciting, but when it is, it really is." As they reached safety, Jake turned off his camera and began packing equipment with hands that were noticeably trembling. "You were afraid," Veltara said suddenly, her voice broadcast through the communication system. Jake looked up at the camera. "Of course I was afraid. That bear could have killed me without breaking a sweat. But being afraid doesn't mean you can't function. Fear is just information. It tells you to be careful, to pay attention, to be ready to react. But how do you function while afraid?" asked Mordic, his bark-like voice filled with confusion. "Practice, I guess," Jake replied. "Humans have been dealing with dangerous situations for a long time. We've learned that fear can be useful if you don't let it paralyze you." "Professor." Zeke then leaned forward. "Jake, what you just demonstrated contradicts everything we know about prey species behavior. When faced with an apex predator, the correct response is to flee or hide." "Well, yeah, sometimes," Jake agreed. "But sometimes running just triggers a chase response. Sometimes hiding isn't possible. Sometimes you have to stand your ground and show that you're not easy prey." "Show that you're not easy prey?" Crix squeaked from the floor where he was still recovering. "You're suggesting that you challenge apex predators?" "Not challenge exactly," Jake said thoughtfully. "More like demand respect. Show that you're not helpless, that attacking you would have consequences even if the predator would win." The auditorium erupted in confused chatter as beings from dozens of species tried to process this concept. The idea that prey could demand respect from predators was contrary to millions of years of evolutionary UNDERSTANDING. Dr. Grant packed the last of their equipment and shouldered her backpack. "Ready to head back, Jake?" "Actually," Jake said, looking at the stream where Big Ben was still fishing, "could we observe from the ridge for another hour? I'd like to document how the other bears adapt their behavior around a dominant individual." "Doctor," Grant looked at him with approval, "you're really getting the hang of this research thing." As they hiked to a new observation point, the alien audience sat in stunned silence. Jake had just survived a direct encounter with a massive apex predator and wanted to continue studying it. Professor Zekvin finally found his voice. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to completely reconsider our understanding of predator-prey relationships." In the weeks that followed, xenobiologists throughout the galaxy would begin studying a new concept that Jake had introduced. The idea that some species could coexist with apex predators not through superior technology or hiding, but through earning respect and understanding behavioral boundaries. It was a concept that would change everything they thought they knew about survival. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in the main auditorium of Galactic Academy, preparing to present his research findings. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Word of the humans' impossible study had spread throughout the galaxy, and representatives from hundreds of worlds had come to hear his presentation. Professor Zeke then introduced Jake to the massive crowd. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, I present Jake Mitchell of Earth with his study of apex predator behavior through direct observation." Jake stepped up to the podium, looking remarkably calm for someone addressing the largest scientific gathering in galactic history. Behind him, a massive screen displayed his title slide, Grizzly Bear Social Dynamics and Territorial Behavior, a Field Study. Thank you all for coming, Jake began. Over the past month, I spent 2 weeks in Yellowstone National Park observing grizzly bears in their natural habitat. What I found challenges some basic assumptions about apex predator behavior. He clicked to his first slide showing footage of bears fishing peacefully side by side. The alien audience murmured in amazement at the clear, close-range video of multiple apex predators. First observation, Jake said, apex predators are not constantly aggressive. These bears shared fishing territory with minimal conflict, using complex social signals to maintain order. Veltara raised her hand from the front row. Jake, how did you get so close to film this? The video quality suggests you were within striking distance. I was about 50 yards away for most shots, Jake replied casually. Close enough to observe detailed behavior, but far enough to respect their space. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. 50 yards was closer than most species would approach their own domestic animals, let alone apex predators. Jake continued his presentation, showing footage of the mother bear teaching her cubs to fish. Second observation, these creatures exhibit complex learning behaviors and family structures. The cubs spent hours practicing techniques their mother demonstrated. But how did you avoid being killed? Interrupted Commander Thex, a military strategist from the Rigel system. Our battle protocols recommend a minimum safe distance of 5 kilometers from any apex predator. Jake looked genuinely puzzled. 5 kilometers? That's way too far to observe anything useful. Besides, the bears weren't interested in hunting me. I wasn't their normal prey, I wasn't threatening their territory, and I followed basic safety protocols. What safety protocols could possibly work against creatures that can kill with a single swipe? Asked Dr. Helix, a renowned xenobiologist from the Centauri system. Standard bear safety, Jake replied. Make noise when moving through their territory so you don't surprise them. Keep food properly stored so you don't attract them to your camp. Don't get between mothers and cubs. Back away slowly if you encounter one. Basic stuff. The alien scientists exchanged glances. What Jake described as basic stuff sounded like military grade. Survival tactics to them. Jake clicked to his most dramatic footage. The encounter with Big Ben. The auditorium fell silent as they watched the massive bear approach. Jake and Dr. Grant. This is our encounter with the dominant male of the territory, Jake explained as the video played. Notice how we responded to his dominance display by making ourselves appear larger but not challenging his authority directly. You stood your ground against an 800-pound apex predator, whispered Crix, who had finally managed to stay conscious through one of Jake's presentations. Running would have been worse, Jake explained. Bears can run much faster than humans. Running often triggers a chase response. By standing our ground but showing submission, we demonstrated that we weren't a threat but also weren't easy prey. The concept of not being easy prey sent another wave of confusion through the audience. Most galactic species had survival strategies, based entirely on avoiding predators, not on discouraging them from attacking. This brings me to my main conclusion, Jake said, clicking to a new slide. Apex predators are not mindless killing machines. They're intelligent creatures that make cost-benefit analyses about potential conflicts. If you can demonstrate that, attacking you would be more trouble than it's worth. Most predators will choose easier options. Professor Ziegton stood up. Jake, what you're describing contradicts millions of years of evolutionary understanding. Prey species survive by avoiding predators, not by negotiating with them. Maybe that's true for other worlds, Jake said thoughtfully. But on Earth, humans evolved alongside our apex predators. We competed with them for resources, we sometimes hunted them, and we learned to coexist. We developed tools and strategies that made us dangerous enough to respect. You hunted apex predators? Asked General Corax, a military leader whose species had been driven underground by their world's predators. You actively sought out these creatures for combat? Well, our ancestors did, Jake clarified. Humans have been hunting bears, big cats, and other large predators for thousands of years. Not just for protection, but for food and materials. A successful hunt could feed a tribe for weeks. The auditorium erupted in shocked chatter. The idea of actively hunting apex predators was beyond comprehension for most of the audience. Jake continued his presentation, showing more footage and data. But the alien audience was struggling to process what they were hearing. Here was a species that had not only survived on a planet with multiple apex predators, but had actually thrived by learning to interact with them. Questions? Jake asked. As he finished his presentation, Valtara stood up slowly. Jake, I need to understand something. When you were facing that enormous bear, you were afraid, correct? Absolutely, Jake replied. I was terrified. But you continued functioning. You kept recording data, you followed safety protocols, you made rational decisions. How is this possible? Jake thought for a moment. I guess humans learned a long time ago that being afraid and being functional aren't mutually exclusive. Fear gives you information about danger, but you can't let it shut down your thinking. If you do that, you die. But fear is supposed to trigger flight responses, protested Dr. Helix. It's a survival mechanism that makes you escape danger. Sometimes, Jake agreed. But sometimes running gets you killed. Sometimes hiding gets you killed. Sometimes you have to think your way through a dangerous situation. Professor Ziegfeld had been quietly researching on his personal device during the presentation. Now he stood up with a grim expression. I have been reviewing the Galactic database on planetary classifications, he announced. Earth is listed as a Class 12 death world. The hazard rating indicates that most galactic species would require environmental suits and armed escorts just to visit safely. The auditorium fell silent. Class 12 worlds were considered uninhabitable by galactic standards. They were places where research was conducted only by remote probes. Jake, Professor Ziegfeld continued, your homeworld is classified as having atmospheric toxins, unstable weather patterns, dangerous radiation levels, aggressive plant life, and apex predators. In every major ecosystem, Jake looked surprised. Really? I mean, yeah, there are some dangerous places, but most of Earth is pretty nice. Millions of people go camping and hiking every year without problems. Camping, repeated Valtara faintly. You voluntarily sleep outdoors on a death world? Sure. It's fun. You get to see wildlife, enjoy nature, cook over a campfire. Some of my best memories are from camping trips. The revelation that humans considered recreational activities on a Class 12 death world to be fun sent the alien audience into stunned silence. This explains everything, Professor Ziegfeld said slowly. Humans didn't develop advanced technology to hide from predators because they couldn't hide. They developed psychological and physical adaptations to coexist with danger. What we consider impossible risks, they consider normal environmental challenges? Jake shrugged. I guess every planet is different. But yeah, if you grow up somewhere, you learn to deal with whatever challenges it has. As the presentation ended and the audience began to disperse, conversations buzzed throughout the auditorium. Jake's research had done more than document bear behavior. It had revealed that an entire species could evolve not just to survive on a death world, but to thrive there. Valtara approached Jake as he packed up his equipment. Your next project, she said carefully. What will you study? I'm thinking about deep-sea creatures, Jake replied cheerfully. There are some really interesting predators around hydrothermal vents. Should be a nice change of pace from terrestrial work. Valtara stared at him. Hydrothermal vents were underwater volcanic environments with crushing pressure, toxic gases, and temperatures that could melt metal. To Jake, this sounded like a relaxing research opportunity. What kind of world, she whispered to herself, produces beings like this? Professor Ziegfeld overheard her question and smiled grimly. A world that teaches its children that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's functioning in spite of it. As Jake left the auditorium, still humming cheerfully to himself, they gathered. Scientists began to understand that humanity represented something entirely new in galactic civilization, a species that had learned to dance with death and call it normal life.